So, when did counseling stop being about problem solving? Well, not anymore. Introducing solution-focused counseling with the Unlicensed Counselor. And now, here's your host, Steve Moak.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Unlicensed Counselor. My name is Steve Moak. I am The Unlicensed Counselor. As always, so grateful to be here on a steamy, boiling Scottsdale, Arizona day here. It is going to be a hell of a hot week out here in the desert, but hey, we love it. I'm actually doing a fun little thing, doing a little record session on a Tuesday because this episode is going to drop on July 4th. So happy 4th of July wherever you're at. I hope it's somewhere nice, relaxing, you with your family, you enjoy it, and forget all this serious stuff that's going on in the world. Actually, I think I have some old episodes on spending some time with your family on vacation as well, too. If you want to go back and maybe listen to those a little bit sooner rather than later, pick up some tips to keep those seas smooth while you're hanging with your family over the holidays. But as usual, got some fun stuff to talk about. Went with a little red, white, and blue shirt to kind of get in the spirit of this whole thing. But I was listening to another podcast this week, and there was a throwaway line just in the podcast, and it was talking about how things are always hard in the beginning. And it really struck me as someone who has gone through personal stuff, whether it's drug and alcohol addiction and divorce. You know, more recently, it's on the business front and startups that I either consult with or businesses that I've personally helped grow. Like, I just find it's really easy to get down on yourself because it's just hard to get started. So that kind of struck me over the course of the last few days as I was thinking about this, and then started to do some show prep because obviously we're recording this a little bit earlier. So I want to bring this idea to you on why things feel so hard in the beginning, why it is hard to kind of get going, why it's hard to kind of, start a project, start a business, start an idea, personal improvement, goals, all that type of stuff. And then I want to talk about some ways that hopefully you can break through that hardness and get to the actual thing that you're trying to achieve as well, too. So, it's just been it's just weird. When I listen to a ton of podcasts, I don't even know if I listen to that much music anymore. It used to be like all music, and now it's all podcasts. But I hear these things, and sometimes there's just a thought or like a little line where I'm like, oh, wow, that actually really kind of resonated with me. And when that hits my ears, you know that I want to bring something to you as well, too. So before we dig into that, I do want to continue to say a big thank you to our friends over at ShareTech. If you need an at-home drug or alcohol screen, go to betterdrugtest.com. Order one of those. We'll ship it right to your front door. This is the industry leader in at-home drug and alcohol screens. You know me. I've been personally impacted by drug and alcohol addiction. I've been tested hundreds of times in my life. This is the drug test that me and my loved ones personally use. Go to betterdrugtest.com and pick up that drug test. Second plug, I always like to talk about the nonprofit work that I do. Go to the StopStartsHere.org. This is the youth drug abuse prevention organization that I co-founded, where all we do, the one mission that we have, is youth drug abuse prevention, and that's only focused on social media. We want parents to follow. We want kids to follow. We've got a ton of new content that I'm just getting ready to release. So give us a follow at Hardstop Official, wherever you follow, all of that stuff. Last thing, I always do like to plug the Unlicensed Counselor as well here, too. Give me a follow on Instagram, where I put out a ton of content. Facebook as well, too. The YouTube channel is growing. What, we used to be at like 10 or 11? I think we're maybe up to 40 or something now. So, hey, slowly but surely, 1,000-mile journey begins with a single step, as somebody older than me said. So give me a follow. And then also working on some speaking presentations where I'll be able to travel and come have myself out to speak, primarily on youth drug prevention or youth addiction kind of topics as well, too. So look forward to more coming down the pipe for me on that. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. So, in my first half of my career, I was in corporate sales roles. The good thing about working for big companies is you kind of get in, you get trained, they tell you what you do, you have your quotas, you kind of get going, and it's very clear what you have to get done. The second half of my career was involved in startups. I have built and have grown some of my own startups. I've consulted for some other startups. I still continue to have my own ideas and businesses that I continue to work on as well, too. Hopefully some that I'm not going to talk about till you actually kind of build some momentum around and see if there's actually a business there. Because, as somebody once told me, ideas are cheap, but execution is everything. I really do believe that, and I have a lot of ideas, but only certain ones kind of make it through to the actual, should we take a run at this phase? But even as somebody who's done this a couple times over, still haven't hit that home run or grand slam that we'd always like to hit. You learn a lot throughout the process. But one of the things that I do find, and I find it not just with myself, but with many others as well too, you kind of get an idea, you get a little bit of momentum, and then sometimes you feel like you get stuck. Whether it's you run into a wall, or you're just not sure, or it just feels hard, or you're just not ready to take the next step, or you're kind of paralyzed. And I've had that going on in my own life with some of the things that I'm working on, and I wanted to explore the reason why that is. So, let me just go through a list of some of the reasons why. And again, if you're working on a project, if you've got an idea, maybe it's personal goals, maybe it's weight loss, maybe it's business, maybe it's family, whatever it is, think about, why you may be stuck right now and why it's kind of hard to get that off the ground. And hopefully maybe one of these ideas will land with you, and then we'll give you some ways to hopefully get unstuck and get moving and working towards that goal as well too. And the first thing I had on this list of why it's hard to get started is just the fear of the unknown, right? Pretty straightforward. So new tasks can create anxiety and fear. You don't know what to expect. It just seems daunting. It's overwhelming. It's this big thing. You've got all these ideas kind of swirling in your head, and sometimes that just kind of gets you to stuck, right? You get that paralysis by analysis. You got all these ideas floating around your head, and you just kind of get in that, and you're just like, I don't know. I don't know what I need to do. I don't know what the next right thing is. You start, your mind kind of swirls a little bit, right? So that first thing I think that's pretty obvious is that fear of the unknown. And that's a big thing, right? You just don't know if you've got the next billion-dollar idea or if this thing's going to be a bust, and that can be a scary thing, right? So number two is whether or not you have the skills or knowledge. Do you lack the skills or knowledge to kind of execute on that idea as well too? So it often requires certain skills or knowledge, and if you don't have that learning curve or that barrier to entry can be challenging. I find this is often more blown up in your head than it really should be. What I find is that most problems are solvable if you get in there and break it down and just get going on this. But I have certainly been in the position where one of the startups that I was involved in early, it was involved building a mobile application. I was like, I've never built a mobile application. But all of a sudden, we've got an investor who's put money into the deal, and I've got to go deliver on this mobile application idea. It was a mobile app for behavioral health organizations and how they could stay connected with their clients post-discharge. And it was like, okay, well, are you gonna attack this, or are you gonna get scared and just sit here and do it because you haven't done it before? And the answer was jump right in. Shocker. That's my approach. And if you've listened to this podcast for more than an episode or two, I think you kind of get my wiring is kind of go all in and get into things. And that's what I did. And you know what? I delivered on it. It was an outstanding product that we built. Did I make a lot of mistakes along the way? You betcha. But you figure things out. You really do and can figure things out. Now, the next thing why some of these projects or business ideas or whatever it is may seem hard is this procrastination or lack of motivation. This isn't one that I've necessarily struggled with, because when I get an idea, I'm ready to charge it. My problem is sometimes I get too many ideas and kind of spread myself too thin. So I've even created my own filter in my world where it's like, okay, I'm willing to, is this idea worth investing $1,000 of my own money into? And if I'm willing to do that, and then I start doing it, then I'll continue to push it. If it's just, I bought a domain on GoDaddy or something like that, that doesn't really meet the threshold of me taking this idea too seriously, even though I do love buying domains on GoDaddy. But procrastination is a thing that a lot of people struggle with, right? Or that lack of motivation. And again, this could be on a personal goal as well, too, whether that's going to the gym, a fitness, diet, exercise, sleep, whatever that is. So that makes it really hard if you have that wiring to kind of take that first step, right? And that's where a good friend or mentor or colleague is a good sharp elbow could help you probably get started. But we'll get to more on that when I tell you, how to kind of get moving on some of these things as well. But procrastination and lack of motivation is a significant barrier to entry as well. Another one that we have is perfectionism, right? So perfectionism is a desire to do something perfectly that can prevent us from starting at all. We might feel like if we can't do it perfectly, then we shouldn't do it at all. Again, not one that I necessarily struggle with, but I do know a lot of people who are like this. It's like, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. And maybe early on in my startup career, I might have felt a degree of this where it was like you feel like you needed to go do all these things. Now, a decade later, and having made a lot of mistakes along the way, it's like I can really clear a lot of this, I'll even call it kind of fluff, or the things that you should, or kind of make you look like you know what you're doing, and just get to the meat and nitty gritty of what you need to be doing. And there's a big difference, right? So that need for perfection, or to have it all set up, or the right time to do this, or the right market, or the right window, it's like, look, you're never going to time it right. Sometimes you're going to get lucky, sometimes you're going to get unlucky, but you got to be able to move that whole perfectionist thing, and I got to do it then, or wait and get this right. It's never going to be right. It's never going to be the right time. All those things are gone. And I'm just speaking as someone who's been there and done it pretty well, and then I've done it crappily as well too. So get that perfectionism kind of thought out of your process, out of your mind, if you're really serious about kind of getting something started. Now, here's one that I do personally resonate with, is overwhelmed, right? It's a real easy one and common one. The size or the complexity of the task can just feel insurmountable. Right? You just kind of look at this thing and you've got this great idea and you're just like, where do I even start? Where do I even begin with this? How do I even tackle this? And the answer is, just what I said to open the show, 1,000-mile journey begins with a single step, right? And that, when you look at it from that perspective and you break things down a little bit more simply, that big mountain of thing that you want to do, that you probably can do, starts to become a little more achievable than just looking at this massive obstacle that you think that you can do. And I've always kind of envisioned it when I've gotten into these startups of just a giant boulder that I'm just trying to slowly turn just a little bit each and every day. And what do you know, before long, you're able to get that thing moving and build a little bit of momentum. Now, next on the list is the idea of the fear of failure. Now, I feel like you hear that term thrown around a lot, that fear of failure, fear of failure. It's a real thing. Like, it is a real thing. And the reason why it's a real thing is because once you get in there, maybe you've taken some investor money, maybe you've taken some family money, and you're out there doing it, like, stuff gets real quick. And there's no safety nets when you get into these things as well, too, whether it's a project or a business or whatever it is. And I hate to say it, but especially in the startup world, most of these things fail. I mean, most of these things lose money. Most of these things never get past the first year of their business. I want to say it's like 80-90% never make it past year one. They run out of money. Co-founders get into arguments. They, pivot and change the original idea into a different product, and all of a sudden, money's gone, and you're left there. Your ego's probably in tatters because you've technically failed. And that's a really, really hard, dark place to be in as well, too. And so with that in mind, a lot of people just won't start, right? I completely get the fear of failure thing, especially having been in some that didn't go as planned, not total failures, but certainly had much higher hopes for some of the businesses that I've been a part of that just didn't get off the ground. And that's a real reason, especially maybe if you've been burned once before, of like, I don't know if I want to do this again, right? I don't know if I want to do this again. And that's just going to hold you back from getting started. But that ego thing is tough. And especially when you associate your identity with a business or a startup or an idea or a fitness journey or whatever it is, and you're coming up short, and maybe you've made that public, you put it out on LinkedIn and your TikTok and your Instagram and your Facebook and all that stuff, so people are aware of what you're doing, and all of a sudden it's not happening like you were hoping it's going to happen. Like, that hurts. That hurts to publicly kind of fail in that sense as well, too. Now, here's one that it's an interesting one. And again, it gets thrown around online quite a bit as well, too, is the fear of success. It's a real thing. I struggle with even putting this in here, but as I was doing show prep and research, there are some people that, it may seem counterintuitive, but the changes that come with success, the increased responsibility, the higher expectations, and that's just like I'm not sure I want that. I think it's such, and if I'm being honest, I think it's just such a small group of people that, I don't want all the things that come with this, but it is a thing. And I wanted to list out all the things that are there. But that fear of success, I don't think that's a major part of the reason why people don't get started on things or why things are hard. But I think it could be. So I wanted to include it on the list. I just personally am like, really? If you're scared of winning and doing good and building something, then maybe this isn't the right space for you to be in, candidly. But full transparency, added it to the list because it is a potential thing for some folks, even though I don't 100% agree with that. But that's okay. The next one is momentum, inertia, right? The principle of inertia. When an object's at rest, it will stay at rest. And it applies to human behavior as well. So once you settle into a routine, it could be hard to break out of that routine. I 100% understand and can resonate with this. When you get kind of set in these things and set in your ways and you're doing things, now you've got what you think is a really cool idea and maybe you want to try it, but you gotta find the time out of your schedule. You got to carve something out. You got to change things up. It's going to impact all these other areas of your business. It's tough. It's tough getting out of your routine and, starting when all the momentum's going in one way, and maybe it's a good thing. Your job is going well, the wife is good, but you just got this burning desire, idea, or thing that you feel like you have to try to kind of get that momentum and inertia going in a different direction. It is challenging, right? And I understand why people would, maybe not want to do that and say, just not sure the risk is potentially worth it as well, too. Okay, here is probably the most common one, self-doubt, right? You just don't think you can do it. It's very common, right? So a lack of self-confidence can prevent individuals from believing that they're capable of successfully completing this. I think that if you don't have some self-doubt, there's probably something wrong with you. Again, when I'm talking about, I was going to say more the startup thing, but in life, whether it's signing up for a marathon or wanting to bench 300 pounds, the idea seems so far-fetched at times when you're putting things out there, and it's just that self-doubt creeps in. I have it in my head with a lot of the things that I do. You think that it was easy to walk into a studio a year and a half or 2 years ago with zero podcasting experience and go, let's go create a podcast? And it's not like they sat me down when I came into the studios. Here's how a podcast works. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. It's like, there's the chair, there's the camera, there's the microphone, lights, camera, action. And, 70, 80 episodes later, now you're still listening to me talk and the downloads are going up. I had no idea that people would, I'd be successful in this, if you want to call it that. I think it's a relatively successful show. We'll put that out there, right, Robin? Appreciate the nod, even if you don't believe it. But you know what? It is what it is. Like, I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I'd make it past 5 episodes. But here we are, 70, 80 episodes in. We're getting good feedback. How many? 70. Bingo. On the nose. And you know what? Self-doubt still exists, by the way, when I'm out here doing it. It's like sometimes you just get in here and you're like, do people really? Are those numbers real? Do people really listen to this? But it's true. But again, that self-doubt is just something that you're going to have to deal with and learn to overcome. But it is a reason why it can be difficult to get started as well, too. All right, couple more things on this list as to why it's hard to get started. Then I want to start to get to kind of the solution-focused stuff, which I'm big on, even though my voice today is, we're fighting the good fight, Robin. Number 10 is lack of resources, right? So you don't have the time, you don't have the money, you don't have the equipment. Look, sometimes those things are just harsh realities, right? They're just harsh realities of if you don't have this, you can't do it. Doesn't mean you can't be resourceful and hopefully find a way to start to put some of these things together in order to really go after something that you want. But, lack of resources can be a real thing. It just is. Hard fact. Next up on the list, external pressures and expectations. So pressure from friends, family, society, kind of when you're starting a new endeavor and they kind of look at you like, really? Like the world needs another podcast, Steve? And I'm going, I think it'll be fun. We'll see if I'm any good at it, see if anybody listens. And I'm not afraid to put myself out there. But certainly when I floated the idea of creating my own podcast, they were like, yeah, okay. Sure, good luck with that, Chief. And you know what? I'm not going to say I proved them wrong, but we're still here. We're still doing it. And I'm having a blast doing it. But I understand that it is a big reason why people don't get started as well, too. I think this probably comes up in the entertainment industry as well, too, right? It's like, I want to be an actor. Okay, great. I want to be a stand-up. Good luck with that. And, people just kind of give you the polite, like, okay, sure. What about law school or that MBA you were talking about? And then you see the people who successfully go on and become great actors and comedians and all this kind of fun stuff. Look, there's risk associated with it. And if you're able to kind of step outside and not let those external pressures get to you, and risk the chance for greatness, sometimes it can happen. And if it doesn't happen, you're going to learn something along the way, right? Which leads to the next one is the comfort zone thing. People prefer to stay in their own comfort zones where things are safe, where they're familiar. And it's hard to venture into these new areas and do things that you haven't done. And that is a tough thing to break out of that comfort zone, to go out and start a podcast or start your own YouTube channel or go start a business or raise capital or go on a fitness goal or run a marathon, bench 3, whatever the heck it is. You've got to move from an area where you're safe and comfortable and you know what your daily routine is going to look like to, all right, screw it. Let's go for it, right? Let's go figure this thing out. And sometimes that is hard to do. Sometimes it's really hard to do. And last but not least, on why things are hard to get going is sometimes you just lack the clear goals. You just don't know exactly where it is you need to go and how to get there. And I have been there. And even when I've started down that road, it's like there's all these different areas in which you could go. And how do I know I'm picking the right one? Use your judgment. Go after it and see what happens. And don't be afraid of that fear of failure thing, right? But it can be hard to know where to start or where to take that first step. It just is. And there's no real great answer to do that other than to just get out there and try it, right? So that was my little rundown. Whew, boy, I really feel like I shot out of a cannon today coming in here talking about this. Well, that's where the good stuff comes from, I hope. So I've listed out why it's kind of hard to get started on some of these things, right? Now let's talk to how do we overcome some of these initial difficulties? How do we build that momentum? How do we find that inertia? How do we kind of get ourselves propelled into whatever it is that we want to get started, right? The number one thing, and I even touched on this briefly, is break that task down, right? Don't look at the mountain. Look at just the single steps that you need to take to start to get there, right? Rome wasn't built in a day has never been a truer statement. You just got to start. I like to take the easiest stuff, right? Go buy the domain, start to look at how to put together a website and start to, put together a little outline of what it wants to look like. Ideas will start to kind of formulate in your head. Break it down into manageable steps. Focus on creating all these little small things and do the easy stuff first. Some people say do the hard stuff. I like to do the easy stuff because I like to build momentum, and all of a sudden I've got 10 out of the 20 things done just because I just kept going. And as you build that momentum, it starts to get a little bit easier, right? So break things down. Don't look at the monster task. Be like, all right. And look, I like to physically, you always see me pen in hand, paper. I write everything down. Write it down. Put a list together. List it out in order if you need to do it. Or write everything down and go through and number it. Cross them off. I love crossing things off my list when I get going. And it just makes it easier to get going, right? Next up on the list of how to break these things, how to overcome those initial difficulties, set some realistic goals, right? Set some, the business idea is going to be worth $1 billion in a couple months or even a couple years, right? Establish some achievable milestones that'll help give you the motivation that you can realistically hit along the way. Again, this can be running, exercise, this can be business, this can be family, this can be personal, whatever it is. Just set a goal that can be reached so that when you reach it, you can feel like you've achieved that progress along the way too, right? Keep it simple, keep it very manageable, and just slowly build your way into whatever the task is that's leading to this much bigger thing, right? Number 3, seek some support, right? Seek out somebody who's done whatever it is you're trying to do. I hear this with stand-up comedy. I love stand-up comedy. I was listening to a stand-up comedy podcast on the way over here. And it's like those guys tell stories about the early days when they're doing open mics. They went from didn't know if they could even tell a joke to doing an open mic to finding another comic to getting some notes to kind of telling them about setup and punchline, and they just kind of brought people under their wing. And what do you know, 100 years later, or 50 years later, they've got this amazing career that's behind them. Little stuff like that. If it's in the startup world, find somebody who's done it successfully and see if you can bring them on as a mentor, right? It doesn't have to be I don't want you to glom onto people, but if you can buy them a coffee, maybe every, once a month, you can check in with them. Here are my ideas. Is this the right way to do this? Is this the right way to do that? I'm unsure on this. And come prepared to those meetings with a list of questions that you can maybe ask them and get some feedback on very quickly so you can iterate and get to whatever it is, the problems that you need solved, right? Pretty straightforward. And the next to last thing I have is really embrace imperfection. You know what? Whatever it is, when you're going to get started doing something different, it's not going to go great all the time. When people ask me about doing a podcast, some episodes are better than others. And that's just the reality of what it is. And I know that. I'll wrap a show some time and go, yeah, that wasn't my A game. It wasn't my A game, but it was still good. And there's still good information. I'm also very critical of myself, but I also understand that some things are going to be better than others, and I'm totally okay with that. It just is a part of what it is. It's a learning process. I am trying to focus on progress, not perfection. To all you, Bill Wilson friends out there, you might recognize that phrase from our little blue book, Hint, Hint, AA. Progress, not perfection. And honestly, I learned that in AA, and I just take it into all these other areas of my life as well, too. It's like, look, just start going. Sometimes you're going to make a ton of mistakes. Try and minimize those mistakes. Try and minimize expensive mistakes if you can as well, too. Learn along the way, but just keep going. Just wake up the next day and be like, all right, let's go try this again, and let's see what happened and make the next best decision that you have the ability to do. Last but not least, I had this sign in my bedroom in high school when I was growing up. Just do it, right? It was just the little Nike. It was like a black sign with the little Nike swoosh in like red, and it just said, just do it. And I remember that, and I still believe it to this day. Sometimes you just got to get up and say, I'm just going to go for it, right? There's just no other way to do it other than just do it. Just get up, go try whatever that is, go start that podcast, go get to that open mic, go walk into the gym and sit down and start doing some kind of exercise. Whatever it is, sometimes you've just got to commit to it and say, screw it, I'm going to give it a shot, and I don't care if it doesn't go well or not. And I guarantee you're going to learn something one way or the other. It may not go perfect, may go awesome, but you're going to learn, you're going to grow, and things are going to get better. So, look, I've had this idea in my mind, as usual, around why it's so hard to get started. So if any of these ideas resonated with you today, think about why you may feel stuck, why you can't get started right now, and then take one of these 5 ideas on how to kind of break that and see if you can put some action into whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So anyways, I hope you got a little something out of it. Hope you enjoy your 4th of July. That is today. Really enjoy spending time with you. And thanks as always for tuning in. If this episode makes sense, please share it with a friend. Your support continues to help grow the show, and I really appreciate it. My name is Steve Moak, and I'm the Unlicensed Counselor. Till next time, thank you very much.